Hello, today we are here for Dune Imperium review. This one has been long awaited, and there's a reason for that, and that is when we first got it, we got it to the table pretty quick once we actually got it. But the first time we played it, we didn't feel it was a fair review because when we got into it and playing it, uh, Miranda does not like any kind of combat game, and she was playing with us, and we didn't realize how important combat was until we started playing, and she basically tuned out as soon as we started. Even though I think she won.
She still won.
She still won the game, but she did not like it at all, and it was she was not happy. And honestly, I was probably even more miserable than she was because I was looking for ways to score points in the game because I like point salad games. This is not a point salad game.
It's not.
This is a heavy combat, very tight resource and victory point game. There's a lot of competing, a lot of basically one-upping each other to try to fight for the very scarce victory points in this game, and there's not a lot of ways to score them. So given that, I was very disappointed the first time we played it. We recorded a very scathing review of this game.
Yeah, I was the only one that enjoyed it.
Yeah, we recorded a very scathing review. And after we did, and we looked at what everybody else was saying about the game, we're like, we obviously missed something. So we wanted to give it a second try. So we came back to play it again, knowing more about it this time as far as...
We did 4-player.
We did 4-player. First time we played 3. And we brought in people who we actually enjoy more combative type games, like Jonathan. And we brought Tajic, Caleb, Andrew, whatever you want to call him.
Miranda's brother.
Yes. So given that, so we wanted to give a new review and scrap the first one, and we're going to give a clean assessment of this game. So first thing, quality of pieces. I don't think my view on this is going to change a whole lot. The cards are, to me, the same kind of stock you get in a Kickstarter in general. They're already dented in some of them, like there's one that's got a dent in it. I'm not happy with the card quality in these. That is this being one of the key parts of the game, it brings the game down a lot for me. The board's fine. I think that's more thematic. We'll get to the theme, I guess, but the colors on it, I don't mind the colors, but I know when Miranda was looking at it, she didn't like the darkness.
She thought it was too dark.
Yeah, and the board is very dark.
Mm-hmm.
But it didn't bother me because the pieces are pretty vibrant colored, so it didn't. Well, I guess the blue's pretty dark too, but they stand out decently. It's not like everything melds together.
My only critique with it, I didn't mind the cardstock so much. I mean, it's nothing special for sure, but it wasn't horrible either, in my opinion. But I thought that the individual player pieces were quite bland. They're just cubes, circles, and I mean, the agent meeples look okay, but there's nothing really special about them either. But more than anything, my huge critique was the spice and the Solari. I thought they could have done a little bit more with that because spice is so important in the book.
Yeah. That,
even if they made it acrylic and see-through or something special instead of just wooden hexagons and wooden circles. I mean, they're just so plain looking.
Yeah, and there's not enough of them.
Right, that's true too.
You run out of them, you can easily
and it's supposed to be infinite. So.
Yeah, especially the Solari. The spices are harder to come by, so you probably are going to run less risk of there. But we definitely run out of Solari during the game.
So yeah, I was disappointed. As my opinion, I was disappointed in the quality pieces with the spice and Solari. I wish they would have done something a little bit more special.
What do you think, Jonathan?
First time playing it, the cardstock was okay. I've seen better in other games.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, there's no texture. To me, it's a very glossy, flat finish,
which can be difficult to look at sometimes.
It's not the best thickness.
I think the thickness for the smaller cards were okay for being small.
Yeah, these don't. I mean, they're still thin and they're still glossy, but it doesn't bother me as much on these. Right. But either way, we're going to have to sleeve these because I've already seen dents on these cards, and we've only played with it twice.
Right.
Like I said, the board I think is fine. The cardboard pieces are a good thickness; they're not bad. overall, I'm going to probably give this one I think I gave it a 6 the first time. Maybe a 5, I can't recall, but
I think it was a 6.
I think it was a 6. And I think I'll stick with that. And it's really kind of I don't think there's anything real exciting about this.
I agree. I'd give it a 6 too, because it's a little bit better than Catan, which is, as you probably know by now, we've seen our reviews, that Catan is our 5, it's our middle. So it's a little bit better than that, but not by a lot.
Yeah.
What would you give it out of 10?
5 or 6.
5 or 6?
Yeah. All right. So theme, obviously, if you're a fan of Dune, this is going to appeal to you thematically. I am not a huge fan of Dune. I watched the movie from David Lynch back in the 1980s.
And please don't compare this game to that for those of
you. Immediately I'm like, I want to play Fade. I was making a joke because I know he's not really in the book, and at least that's what I heard. And it was really a made-up character for Sting to actually have an appearance in the film. So, given that fact, it was more of a joke. But yeah. It would have been cool to have Sting in here.
It would have been
as
funny.
A promo card.
Yeah,
that would have been neat.
And maybe instead of Sting for the new version, maybe it's Justin Bieber.
Is Justin Bieber in the new one?
No, but
maybe that's why they delayed it significantly so they could get Bieber in it.
Jonathan's a believer, if you don't know.
No. So, as far as the theme, as we mentioned, it's really dark, and that turned off before we even got playing the game. That turned off Miranda, although she did like the purple. She had to comment on that.
Oh,
the purple, it has purple on there, so she liked the purple. But as far as the look of it, I think it's appealing look on the board. And the art on the cards is very pretty, and presumably it looks more like the modern movie as far as the characters that are in it looking like the actors and actresses. I haven't really looked at them to look close enough to know if that's the cast or not.
Right. So if you didn't know, this version of the game is based off of the production that was supposed to come out late 2020. They delayed it due to COVID, so hopefully it's coming out this year at some point. So some of the artwork is supposed to be based off of the film, but coming from someone who is a fan of the books, and I like the David Lynch movie, but I didn't like it because it resembles the book. It doesn't. I mean, it's very different than the book. This, I think, is a little bit closer to the book, but I like the darkness of the board because the book is dark. I mean, it could be a little bit depressing, and so And I don't think it's a long book. It's not that long.
They aren't? I thought they were like super thick.
No, they're not that big.
Okay.
Oh no, I've got much larger.
This is coming from a guy
novels.
that only reads bathroom reader articles, so there's that.
Dune's not that huge compared to other books out there.
If it's longer than 4 pages, I've lost interest.
All right, then it's long to Randy. So, but what's really cool thematically is I think that it really pulls on the source material, and like we got our faction tracks, which we'll talk about during gameplay, but that adds tension. And then you got these different planet actions in the middle. That doesn't. The tension comes from blocking, which is pretty common for worker placement. But you got the tension there, so it's got that same tension in the book. If you want to compare it to anything, I guess it's close to Game of Thrones with the different factions warring with each other and trying to one up each other and gain favor with the Emperor. And that's what the book is about too. So
I think the real tension's in the combat, which
well, I agree. That's definitely part of it, but also just trying to work up here and competing with each other for space and actions
and blocking people when they're just about ready to do
right. That was really fun, and I think
that was not fun.
So there is no artwork to the intrigue cards at all. So these are very bland thematically,
but they're very functional.
They're functional, but thematically, it's still not a whole lot there.
Mm-hmm.
But the art for the market cards were really nice.
Yes.
I think that they did a really nice job of the artwork.
Now, we should point out, because we didn't really talk about what kind of game this is, for anyone who's not aware, this is a worker placement and deck builder game. This is, you start out with a very rudimentary deck that is common for everybody, and you acquire cards to improve your deck during the game, potentially get rid of some of the cards in your deck throughout the game. And then also, obviously, you're taking spaces on the board. So,
but that's more of the game.
well, I know, but I
stuff,
wanted
so.
to give them at least a general idea of what we're trying to accomplish in the game. You know,
But thematically, what would you score?
as far as the theme goes, I think it does give you a feel of, you know, from what I know of Dune, it gives you a feel of it. I think that the art is pretty on the
rulebook.
The rulebook is really pretty, but I think it's just the same image that's on the card. I'm going to give it an 8 on theme.
Okay.
I think it incorporates it well. I don't think there's, you know, some of the iconography is kind of a little weird. Yeah, but I think overall it does everything it needs to do. I don't really like the font of this being so big compared to the rest of the board, but you know, it's functional.
Right. I agree with an 8. I think I enjoyed it. They could have done other stuff to make it better, but it's certainly functional, and I love the artwork, so I'll give it an 8.
I'd give it an 8 as well. Like especially on the character cards, like you've got like Paul Atreides. I mean, that looks exactly like Timothy Chalamet, who's going to be playing. I mean, the artwork is very.
But it looks nothing like Kyle MacLachlan.
No,
That's Paul Atreides to me. I'm sorry.
You're right. It doesn't.
And Dave Bautista, you know, other characters.
Right.
So I'd give it an 8.
Okay. All right. So rule book is our next part.
All right. So the rule book, it's kind of a mixed bag here. It's got, you know, it's got nice pictures. It's got a lot of the things I like to see as far as like the setup is very simple, although they went with a superscript, which is kind of interesting. You don't typically see that.
They got Scrabble tiles.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, I kept wanting to score how many points I got for reading through the setup. But yeah, I mean, it's definitely functional from that. The big takeaway from this is there's the intrigue cards, which we haven't really talked about yet, but it really needed an explanation for those intrigue cards in the book, and it's not
There's
there.
very little. I mean, you got an intrigue card section, but they're really they don't go into a whole lot of detail.
It just tells you
of
when
the
you can
individual
play
cards,
right? And there's several of those that were
can be
very
quite
confusing.
Yeah,
and you know, I know you looked up one on Board Game Geek. The last one we just kind of implied what it was going to be, but I never played it, so it didn't matter. But yeah, there was several times where it would have been nice to have a reference for those, and there's absolutely none here. And the cheat sheet doesn't have any of that. The cheat sheet, which I consider part of the rules, an extension of the rules. The cheat sheet's actually a pretty nice tool. It's on the back of the player cards, all the player cards. But since you're playing 4 players and there's 8 cards, everybody's going to have one left over, so you can flip it over to see the other side.
I think that's a great idea.
Yeah, it was not a bad idea, and it has everything you mostly need in this game as far as standard taking a turn, except for the intrigue cards. It doesn't tell you what the locations do either, but there's a cheat sheet they gave for the locations, which are the locations are more self-explanatory.
I agree.
Than the intrigue cards.
Yeah, the locations I think are pretty self-explanatory. I didn't think that needed a whole lot of explanation.
So, you know, I think I would have rather than wasted that sheet on intrigue cards than to have it based on the spaces. But, you know, it is nice that they gave at least that.
Right.
So I'm going to give this one a 7. You know, as far as I think the intrigue cards are an important enough aspect that it brings it down a lot not having that. You know, besides that, you know, we got a nice icon guide on the back. That's useful, but again, it's stuff that's pretty self-explanatory. You know, especially once you've played the game once, you probably never need that sheet again. Right here.
The only time that I think you might need additional times is that, and we can go over it again a little bit with the gameplay, but the game is designed really to be played 3 to 4 players.
Yes.
But 4 player, you don't have any extras in it. But 3 players, you involve a deck. Well, 3 player, you know, it's 2 and 1 where you involve an extra deck. And so that deck adds like a third person into the game. And the rule book didn't do a really good job with that deck either. I will probably release around the same time my solo review of the game. And I did not like it anywhere near as much solo as I did multiplayer. And that deck it's not confusing. It just didn't add anything to it, and I didn't enjoy it. So there is a solo and 2-player deck you have to play with.
Well, there is a sheet that also is for solo and 2 players.
Completely separate.
Completely separate from this. So I mean, I didn't obviously play. I don't play solo games. So I can't really assess that one, but I'll take your word for it.
But I agree with the rule book. It's functional. It's not great.
Yeah.
So it's pretty. That's the thing that's got going for
Yeah,
it.
it's definitely a pretty cover. I mean,
So-
but again, it's the same as
Yeah.
the word.
So I'd give it a 6 as well. So you didn't read it,
I did
but
not
I said
read it.
7, not
or
6.
7. Yeah, I think I could do a 7.
I'm not sure that I can really.
Just agree with Randy.
Yeah.
Sure.
Okay,
In
that's what
general,
Miranda does.
in life, that's always
So-
best if you just agree with me.
I don't know about that.
All right, so now we move on to gameplay. And so, like Randy mentioned, it's a hybrid game. So we got deck building and we got worker placement. And it's fairly unique. There's not many games out there that kind of do both of those.
Yeah, I mean, you've got.
There's a few.
You
but
want to call it Great Western Trail does it.
Kinda, yeah.
This one, obviously, the Lost Ruins of Arnak.
Right, and this game is compared to that for mechanics. It's a very different game.
I wouldn't say mechanics. I'd say one mechanic. I mean, it's really the cards. That's the only thing. Other than that, it's a completely different
It's
system.
deck building and the card and how you play the cards. So
Yeah, but I'm saying, the way the worker placement works in that is entirely different than this game.
it's still worker placement.
Okay.
So
You can again, it's always best to agree with me, Rob.
But even Jonathan doesn't necessarily agree with that. So. But anyway, I think we pretty much explained everything, though. I mean, you got your
so.
faction track, and
Well,
so
I was going to say, I don't think we've gone into detail on any of it. So, like the faction track is one of the ways you can score victory points. Each track, there's 4 different tracks on it, and you have to have an icon on a card that lets you play on the track. So each card, we'll get a close up. I'm going to spawn a close up.
get out of the way.
All right, so on the card, it has icons that tell you what spaces you can play on the board. So on the board, you've got the matching icons. So it's really easy for you to look at the icon and say, which spaces can I play on? The icon choices are a little weird because for the Dune planet, they're all basic shapes and colors. So you have yellow triangles, blue circles, green pentagons, which is nice for color blindness or issues with seeing colors. So you can see it by shape or by color. But then on the faction track, it's all these kind of weird icons.
It's like the house symbols.
Yeah, you've got the infinity sign for the travel.
For Spacing Guild. You got the Spacing Guild, you got the Emperor, who's got kind of looks like a helmet.
Yeah, almost looks like one of those trooper helmets from Star Wars.
Then you got the Bene Gesserit, which kind of
I don't know what that is.
I don't know what that
it's
is.
It's like an 8 and a 3 mating. I don't know.
Something. And then you've got, it looks like almost like a targeting symbol for the Fremen.
Yeah.
Or like a Pokeball almost is what it looks like.
Gotta catch them all.
Or it looks like
or a TIE fighter. Yeah.
So on those tracks, there's 2 ways to score. There's everybody can reach the second tier on it and get a victory point. So basically, if you just advance your tiers 2 spaces for every faction, you've guaranteed yourself 4 points. And this is a game you play to 10 points.
Yeah.
So you will automatically get 4 of your 10 points from just walking up the faction tracks. And that really doesn't require any competition other than, 2 spaces per faction. You might have to wait a turn.
You're fighting for the space that allow you to move up.
Yeah.
But it's really not that different.
Yeah. So anybody just playing your turns right, you could get 4 points, not automatically, unless you found other ways to get points that benefit you more. Then as you advance further up the track, there is a second space where there's another victory point that you can gain.
The Alliance token.
And that's for reaching the Alliance. And that one is more fought over because only one person can have it, and whoever has the highest on that track keeps it until someone moves higher than them. So it's very much like Zolkin in the sense of their scoring tracks. If you played Zolkin,
but then once it's maxed out, like Zolkin, you're the only one that has that spot, and you keep that token for the rest of the game.
Right, and you get a perk for reaching the Alliance status.
And there's cards that give you potential bonuses as well if you have those Alliance tokens.
So if you're averaging on a 4-player game, you're going to get 5 of your 10 points potentially from this track. 4 for the easy walk up, 1 for competing for the highest on a track. So in a game, you can expect to get 5 points there. But you have to get 10. So it's really you're fighting for 5 points in the game. And this is where my biggest criticism of the game is. There's not a lot of ways to score. And I know that's maybe the reason some people like it. But for me, it takes away from the game. It's just there's not a whole lot of varying strategies in this.
Right, because we mostly know you love your points.
Exactly.
Games.
I like
and
it.
Again, this is not.
I like it when you can run engines and you can score points from multiple different ways.
Right.
This game is definitely not that. And the first time I played it, I had my
You
head wrapped
hated it.
around trying to find some way to score points, and
It wasn't there.
I didn't want to be in combat every time. But you basically have to be in combat.
Mm-hmm.
You are not going to win if you can't win points in combat, or you can buy the worm cards as the only other options, or get lucky on the intrigue deck.
And that's the thing about the conflict, even if the conflict itself, because this is also a turn counter. So there's two ways in the game. You either get to 10 points, as Randy said, or all of the conflict cards are complete.
There's 10 of those.
And there's 10 of those. So it could be either 10 points or a 10-round game.
Yeah.
And they will either give you victory points, like this one give you 2, or they could potentially give you the option of going up the faction track, which could speed up you getting that alliance token. So it can still give you victory points that way.
Give you resources.
Interestingly, our game ended with going through all 10 of the rounds and somebody getting up to
Right.
10 points.
And I think it did the first time too.
I think so.
Yeah, that's when we broke 10th round was when we finally got to 10. Other than that, you've got the spaces on Dune are mostly for acquiring resources, although some of them are also for deploying troops into the combat.
Yeah.
So there's also a council track
For the Landsrad.
where you can basically do kind of intrigue things. You can gain another worker. You can join the council, which gives you more potential for getting cards as far as influence goes. And then the rest of you can basically get a worker for the round. And that was one of the weirdest things to me in the game.
It is strange. It worked out well for me that one turn.
Yeah.
But basically, you use a card to draw a card, and then you use the worker to get a worker back.
Yeah, so you're netting 0,
Right.
in my opinion, other than you might have a really great
You might be able to get rid
card.
of a crappy card to be able to draw a better card.
Yeah, that's really the only net gain from that. But it costs you 2 coin to do it. So
Right.
it's like, I never would do that. I mean, unless I was desperate, I would not take that action. The other spaces you've got is one that lets you pay 4 coin, and of course having the right icon, the green pentagon, to play 4 people into your combat garrison, not into combat. There's a difference. That's a huge difference in this game.
Which we'll talk about in the combat part.
Yeah, and then another one that lets you get 1 influence and add 1 to your garrison. And then we've also got a Chom. I don't know how you pronounce that.
Choma.
The AM's first. It'd be
CHO. Oh yeah, Chom. I'm sorry, I thought it was.
That lets you get 3 coins for free with a yellow triangle, or pay certain amount of spice to trade for money. This is another problem I have with this game. Spice is super important in this game.
Yes, it is.
Money, not as much. I mean, it's got some use, and we actually found more uses for it this game than we did the first game.
Because our first game, we didn't have any cards that utilized the money for the most part.
Yeah.
It was you use the money up here for the Landsrad for the couple options that we really liked. That was it.
Yeah.
And we didn't need any more. But this time around, I had cards that used money,
I
so I
did as
could
well.
potentially buy victory points. So it was definitely more useful. But even then, money doesn't have a whole lot of use.
Spice is absolutely the most important. Water is useful to get spice, so in that sense, water is important. Money is the third by a long shot.
Right.
And especially since 2 of the action spaces that use money are one-time use in the game. They're very important. Getting a 3rd worker is very useful.
And getting your discount.
Getting your discount on cards can be, if you're going for a strategy of trying to get the worm cards, the spice must flow cards. Because that's the only other form of victory points outside of combat and going up the charts or getting lucky on the intrigue deck.
Right.
And there's very few intrigue cards, which we're going to talk about intrigue in a minute. So I would like to see more use of the money. Hopefully if they expand this, they'll increase the value of the money, because I really think it's lacking.
And we were thinking about, possible errata, or maybe different ways of, if I don't believe in house ruling.
No.
But, maybe if they were to do a 2nd edition or something at some point, maybe using money to be able to reset the cards, because a lot of times in both games, there is a bunch of useless cards up there. I mean, nobody wanted them.
and a
So,
pile of money in
yeah,
any case.
and if there was no way, I mean, it was just pointless to buy some of the cards. So if there was a way to reset that,
Yeah.
that'd have been great.
Now,
Or
I will say money is what won me the game this game.
Yeah.
Because I bought a victory point with money.
Mhm.
I used it to trigger my different cards that I had that were very useful in the game for the combat.
Yeah,
So-
but I think that was a unique situation. I don't
Yes.
know if we're going to be able to say that would happen. for the game.
Exactly. So I can't say that I think money is anywhere close to being the value the others was, but it was definitely way more valuable this game for me
Absolutely.
than it was the first
Absolutely.
time.
I was able to get a victory point with it as well.
So I'll give it, some bonus for that.
But the meat of the game really is the combat. So
it's-
let's talk about that.
Okay, so with combat, you've got two types of deployment. You've got spaces that let you add cubes to your garrison, and those pool, and eventually you can remove them through another mechanism, which is there's spaces that have two cross swords that are your combat spaces. Those let you put troops directly into combat if you acquired any troops this round. So some of them don't give you troops, like all of the spice generating ones. You can send people to combat, but they don't have troops on them.
Right.
So one option is to have your garrison built up first, where you can remove, whenever you go to a combat space, you can take 2 people out of your garrison and put them into combat. The other option is to go to spaces that have troops that generate when you go there, and that lets you put them into combat, because those can go directly into combat.
And that's the most broken spot in the game.
Well, yeah, we'll get
So-
to that. So the cards themselves may give you troops as
That's
well.
true, too.
And any troops you acquire the round you go to a space where there's combat, you can put directly into combat, in addition to taking 2 from your garrison. Now, one space that Robert just mentioned is the Highliner. And the Highliner space is the next problem I have with this game. It is the most powerful space on the board.
Absolutely.
It's costly. It costs you 6 spice to go there. But it is the...
It almost guarantees you
Yeah,
a
I
win
mean, we have not...
for the battle.
Well, there was one situation where
Yes.
it didn't, but it almost always is going to put you in the first spot.
Mhm.
I happen to have a very lucky intrigue card that let me move people out of my garrison all at once into the combat. And
Well, I don't think that's not what did it. It was me. I went there. I put 7 out, and then you did something you got enough to bump it up, and then played intrigue cards to get it.
no, that was when
one
I
point
took
past me.
I took from you. I'm talking about Jonathan.
Well,
Jonathan went here to
Right.
the Highliner. He dumped his pieces. I stockpiled my garrison and then played that card to let me
Yes.
put them all into play.
He stole it from me. Is
Yes.
what he did, and it was a jerk.
I
I
stole
got
it
it
from
stolen
both
from
of you, want
twice
to call it.
Yeah.
So,
But in essence, the Highliner space in general is way too powerful.
Because basically, as Randy said, so when you go here, it's a cross sword space in combination of giving it to be able to deploy 5 troops. So 5 troops, and if you have 2 troops in your garrison, you could pull those 2 out, giving you 7 troops. Each troop is worth 2 power. That's 14 power. Bam.
Right.
One
In
spot.
addition, though, it gives you 2 water, which is the resource you need to get
The
the
spice.
maximum spice. So if you pay the 2 water, you basically recycle the spice. It can go there again.
Right.
And it's it's just kind of a double whammy on you if anyone gets to go there. So it's most fought over space,
Mhm.
particularly later in the game. Early in the game, obviously, it's harder to have those resources. So I think it's a little overpowered. That said, given the fact that,
Conspire's pretty good too.
yeah, there's other spaces too. Conspire's not bad if you're going for money and trying to get this stuff, but
It gives you the entry cards, gives you
Yeah.
2 troops in your garrison. It's pretty good.
yeah. So then the other aspect is the intrigue cards. So talking about the intrigue cards, this is the next problem I have with this game.
Makes it swinging.
I love the intrigue cards. This is my favorite
Yeah.
part of the game. Absolute favorite part of the game. But there's some cards in there that are way powerful, and there's some cards in there that are awful.
So, for example, let's find a really powerful one.
Well, the one that I had,
we know the one that is terrible, but
we had one.
so here's one that's really powerful.
Yeah, well, this one, if you pay, the one he's showing here is if you have 2 spice you pay, you get to drop 7 swords, which I don't think swords are as powerful, because swords, first of all, are only with 1 combat, whereas any of your troops, your cubes, are worth 2 combat.
Right.
So automatically, it's basically 3.5 troops. It's not that broken. The one
But
that I get,
it can make a
all right,
difference.
the
though.
one that I
This
had,
is the one that Randy.
yeah, the
said.
one that I had that said deploy any number of your garrison troops to combat into the combat. That's the one that I thought was. There's no way that's equivalent to what we found, which was 1 water.
Right.
I mean, it's just.
So yeah. So you got dump your garrison and almost guarantee a combat win versus. Let's look for here. We got which is.
Or
you
it's
get,
2
you
money.
get 2
Yeah.
money.
Or it's 1 water.
You get a water.
Yeah.
Not like a bunch of water.
And you
get
draw a blind draw.
Water.
When you get a card from there, you get a blind draw from the deck. So it's not like you get to choose 3 and keep 1. It's just why on earth would you have that much disparity between those cards?
It's huge.
But as far it's still my favorite part of the game. I
They
love
are a
drawing
lot of
intrigue
fun.
cards, not knowing what I'm going to get.
And it's so much that's a big part of the tension is that you're in a combat and Randy's got 3 cards in his hand and Caleb's got a couple cards, Jonathan's got a couple cards, and we're all in it. It's like who's got those intrigue cards?
Yeah.
It's going to swing it in their favor.
It came this close to changing the outcome of the game.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
In this last game we played.
So yeah, I mean it's definitely this resulted in a game that's going to be much like what my favorite game, Battlestars. Battlestar Galactica feels like, where it's like, oh, we're going to be talking about this and that. This person did this and during the game, and it was, it's one of those games that actually feels like that. So I feel better about it now as a result of that. But it definitely there's a lot of things that go right about this game, and there's still a few that just I don't like aspects of it.
And I do think to Jonathan's point, I don't think he really brought it up, but I think it's something you were saying. There's really not a catch-up mechanic.
Right.
Once you get so far behind, you're behind, and I don't know if there's a whole lot you can do. If it's the 8th or 9th round of the conflict and you're 4 or 5 points behind, forget it. There's just no way.
There was a point though. Had he moved to a different spot, I could have probably gained 2 or 3 victory points by the end of the game, which would have made me closer.
Right.
Than it was, but you're right. I ended up with a total of 5 points, and everybody else had at least 10.
Well, I
No,
know.
9 or
at least
10.
10.
9 or 10.
Yeah. But yeah, I think that I don't think it's catch up is really the right word because it's only 10 rounds, and if you're saying in round 8 or 9, if you're behind, you're obviously if you're by 5 points behind in round 8 or 9, it's probably not going to look good for you. There's no way you're going to catch up at that point.
But some
I wouldn't
games have
call that a
catch-up
catch-up.
mechanics.
In that late in the game?
Yeah, I forget which game, but there's that. Quacks where you get a huge boost to buying,
Yeah, but
or
even if
you get to draw it. Some games draw extra cards.
If you are dominating, proportionally at 5 to 10 point, that's like half your score. 10 is the maximum here. So if somebody's at 10 or closing down 10, and somebody's got 5, I don't care how many mice you have in Quacks and Quedlinburg, it ain't gonna catch you up.
Well, but at least you think you could get 2 or 3, but you can't even get that.
2 or 3, that's a huge point count in this game. I'm just saying, I don't think it's a matter of catch up at that point. If you're that far behind in a 10-round game in round 8 or 9. I get your point, and I think this is one of the things. I think there's a lot of frustration created by the tension in this game because there are so few points to go for. It's going to cause people who just not to like things about it. Unless you've got people that are very tolerant of that conflict, and because you can't be set on I'm going to win this ever.
Right.
You are going to think I've got this, and then somebody's going to steal it from you.
You can't take things personally for sure.
It's absolutely not a game you want to play if you're sensitive to that, because it's going to cause frustration amongst you or your people, or if you just don't like combat. And I think most of the reason you don't like combat is because you don't like that tension and being frustrated with your friends. And that's
I enjoyed it.
I enjoy it.
I didn't.
But I know Miranda, that's why she does not like it. But as far as I don't mind that kind of conflict. At times, I do get frustrated at times, but I get over it really quick.
Yeah.
But in this, this game, it looked like somebody was going to steal the entire game from me.
And that would have been epic.
It would have been. I was laughing about it. It would have been funny, but I was absolutely going to fight it if I could.
You won at the end.
But as it turned out, I got 10 points, but the second first place person in the combat got to draw an intrigue card, and their intrigue card gave them a victory point.
If it allowed him to play it. he would have won it.
but he couldn't play it. So it turned out to be an epic win. But yeah, I mean, those are the kind of stories I like. Games that let you do that. So my score originally, I think, on this was a 5. Maybe
I thought you gave it a 4.
It might have been a 4.
I think you did a 4.
I'm doing a pretty big 180 on this.
Yeah, the lack of scoring really got you upset.
It really got me upset the first game. I almost walked out of the game, and I don't do that very often. I really got upset. This time playing through it, I'm going to go ahead. I think I'm going to give it an 8 because I think the more I talk about it, the more I like games that after you're done, you're still talking about.
Right.
And this one has that. And that's not something we really talked about before, but this one definitely has that.
And I think I initially gave it an 8 in our first round, or maybe a 7.
Yeah, I think you and I had a huge disparity on our scores on this one.
And again, so just to backpedal a little bit to the solo part. So with the solo aspect, you do have a deck that you play against, and the deck basically blocks the different areas that you as a solo player can go to. But the problem with the solo variant is the deck building part, because you truly only play the 10 rounds to the conflict deck. You don't buy enough cards quick enough to be able to start seeing a lot of the cards that you buy. So it's deck building, but what's the point to it? Because you don't see enough of those cards that you buy quickly enough to make a difference. Yeah. So to me, the solo part was quite boring. I didn't enjoy it at all. The 4-player, you said a complete 180. I enjoyed it so much more. And I agree. It's
I really was surprised because when we played it the first time, I'm like, if we play it again, I'll probably go up to a 5 or 6, just thinking there's stuff I missed. And there was someone who posted about it on Facebook, and I was having an interchange with them, and they brought up the fact that we only played it one time, and I'm like, you know what? That's a fair assessment. I really think we need to give it another try. And I said, let's put the kibosh on that first review, and let's give it another fair assessment.
Playing with people that enjoy it,
and play with it, and given the fact that we talked more about the other strategies about how you can get points, and I'm like, I think there's enough about it I missed. I want to give it another try, and I think we're giving it a much more fair assessment.
I agree.
I do think there's still problems with it. Don't get me wrong. I still think there's things about it that shouldn't be there, like the disparity on those cards. That's a big one. The power of that highliner space, I think, is still way too powerful. Playing it twice doesn't change that opinion. It's still the same feeling. The Mentat, I feel like, still doesn't have nearly any value. Right. And I feel like in general money is still underpowered for what it should be, although if you get the right cards with the right combination, it can still make a difference. I think that's the sum up of everything I feel about this game that really needs a little work. Apart from that, I think it's a solid 8 now.
What about you?
Personally, first time playing, I'd probably give it a 7.
Okay.
However, that doesn't mean that I wouldn't play it again. I'd play it again, and my guess is my rating would go up. But first time.
So what was your frustration? So we talked about ours, but
my frustration was at one point I was so far behind I didn't feel there was any way I could catch up, and it's just like, what's the point? And that's where I got frustrated.
Right. So you give it a 7.
Yeah.
Okay. Can you, Caleb? What'd you think? Overall gameplay.
6 to 7.
6 to 7.
Because those overpowered spaces.
Yeah.
So I don't know if it came up on the camera or not, but Caleb gave it 6 or 7. Thought it was overpowered on its spaces if you couldn't hear.
That we talked about.
Yeah. I think I think it's still a positive game all around. It's not a bad
completely
game.
different our first review.
Yeah. And again, we played it now a couple times, whereas they both played it one time. So I think that might also be part of it.
And that's what I said. The next time I play it, I'd probably give it a better score.
Yeah.
Just knowing what to do next time.
But as far as we really should start off with the weight and the type of game. We waited until the middle to talk about the type.
We always forget to do this until the end.
As far as the weight of this game or the level, I'd say this is probably a medium to heavy. Would you think?
You think there's? I think it gets to the heavy side.
it's definitely not a beginner game.
I agree.
I'd say
I would
it's
say
medium.
I would
at
say medium.
lowest.
I would say
Yeah,
medium to heavy.
You think medium? It's definitely not something for a starter, and it's also again not something for someone that does not like combat conflict.
Yeah, if you don't like conflict, stay away from this game.
Screw your neighbor.
There is an element to
Yeah,
that.
it's not as heavy as some games. I mean,
For
it's
sure.
definitely not as big as the Ankh-Morpork the other
Yeah,
day we played.
Ankh-Morpork.
That's the whole
Until
point of
you
the
put
game.
something down where you're not allowed to.
Yeah, I blocked a spot, and Jonathan got a little peeved at me for that. And so, but as far as just the date about the game, came out in 2020, so it's a fairly new game. Designers Paul Denon, the artists are Clay Brooks and Meatstorm, and it's published by Direwolf in conjunction with Legendary and Lucky Duck Games. Now the MSRP it's on Card House is going for $50, and then I looked at the third market, so Board Game Geek, eBay, going anywhere between $58 all the way up to $115.
Wow.
So it is pretty hard to get. Jonathan himself, no, you were looking for Lost Ruins, but I don't think Dune Imperium is as hard to find as Lost Ruins of Arnak, but it can be tough depending on where you live at.
Yeah, but I mean, to be fair, both of them came out at the same time.
Almost
They're
the
both
same
brand
day,
new.
yeah.
So yeah, I mean, it's a lot of it's just the initial hype and demand. It's
Right.
going to probably be more readily available, I would assume, along with Lost Ruins of Arnak.
Yeah.
So that's our assessment of Dune. If you like what you heard, or if you don't, either way, give us some feedback. Right below, hit the bell, ring the bell, whatever it is.
Click on the notifications.
Follow us along. We are now all over the place. We have our own website, which is www.legendsofnerdvana. It's still in development.
Yeah.
We've got Facebook. We're on Facebook for any kind of banter back and forth or any requests for new games there to try out. We're on Rumble. We're on what's the other one? Locals.
Yeah, Locals.
We're all over the place. Obviously, YouTube.
Right.
So, follow along, and we'll be happy, to answer any questions you have, and field any feedback. Appreciate you following along, and look forward to talking to you next time.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.